Hey guys, it's P1Motorsports here with another video. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. As you can see, I have a tier list along with every NASCAR console video game. We are going to be ranking all 33 games I have listed below and putting them into their respective tiers. We have Elite, which means the best games, Good, which means that the game is good and definitely worth the money, and then we have Solid, which means the game is fine, you can probably still have fun with it. We have Meh, which means that this game is subpar and lacks in certain areas. Then we have Trash, which simply just means terrible. Just a disclaimer, this is 100% my opinion, and if you would disagree, that's fine, but don't run to the comment section and be a dick about it. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. First up, we have NASCAR 98 for the PS1. This game released August 31st, 2007. It's not bad for an opening game, and definitely has some cool features, but it does lack many tracks and drivers from that time. So for this, it's getting put in Meh tier. Next up, we have NASCAR 99, which released on September 11th, 1998. It did improve on NASCAR 98, and it introduced more tracks and more drivers. Also, night racing, which is quite the spectacle on this game. The cars had slightly better resolution, which definitely added some visual pizzazz to the game. So for this game gets the solid tier. Next up, NASCAR 2000 for the PS1. This game released on September 30th, 1999. Once again, the early EA games improved, and it was definitely an improvement from NASCAR 99. It added more tracks and drivers, introduced legend drivers, had a little bit better graphics, along with interactive pit stops. This game, solid tier. Next up, NASCAR Rumble. This was the first NASCAR arcade game that released on January 31st, 2000, and it is extremely good for an arcade game. It has a lot of licensed drivers. Track selection is pretty decent for a kart racer game. Good tier. Next up, NASCAR 2001. It released on September 19th, 2000. This game was the first game on the PS2. This game also introduced analog steering instead of the weird D-pad steering. The graphics were improved, obviously, due to the console jump. Damage model was updated, but the thing that really stripped back this game, it dropped from 25 cars from NASCAR 2000, and now it was down to 20 in 2001. The features were extremely stripped back, and the game was very bare bones. This game is going in Meh tier, behind NASCAR 98. And just in case you guys haven't picked up on this, but I am going left to right in which game I like better. So it's best on the left and worst on the right. Next, we have NASCAR Heat, which was made by Monster Games and was released on September 27, 2000. It had features that weren't on the EA games. Introduced a staple called Beat the Heat, which was the challenge mode that is now in every NASCAR game. It does lack some drivers and some tracks, but the gameplay is really nice. Solid tier. Next, NASCAR Thunder 2002, the start of the iconic Thunder series. This game released on October 2nd, 2001, and this game was truly revolutionary. This was the first game with a 43 car field and really decent graphics for the time. It introduced multiple paint schemes for a single driver, introduced something called a career mode. It was the first game with all tracks and a 36 race season. This game is definitely going in good tier ahead of Rumble. Next up was NASCAR Heat 2002. This game released on November 14th, 2001. The good about this game is that it has a good damage model and the physics are really solid. But the downside is that it lacks many features that were in the EA game from the time. There's no career mode and it doesn't have near as many features as Thunder. But it's still solid. So solid tier ahead of NASCAR 2000. NASCAR Thunder 2003. This game released on September 19, 2002. This game featured a more in-depth career mode, introduced challenges to the EA series. Challenges were based off of real-life events, which gave it a really good feel. And it added many gameplay improvements. This game was the first true elite NASCAR game. Next up, we have NASCAR Dirt to Daytona. This game released on November 11, 2002. And it was the first game with the lower NASCAR series. Had the Featherlight Modified series, the Truck series, and a weekly Racing Dirt series. The upgrade system for the career mode is solid, and I'm going to be honest with you, this game has some of the best dirt racing physics I've ever felt in a game. The career mode is really in depth, and in my opinion, this is my single favorite NASCAR game of all time. The elite tier for this game, easily. Next up, we have what many people call the GOAT of the NASCAR gaming series, NASCAR Thunder 2004, which released on September 16, 2003. This career mode was really in-depth, and it was the first game with a rival system, and introduced something called a test mode. It introduced more Thunder challenges, and the gameplay is just overall really good. Now, I don't like it as good as Dirt to Daytona, but I definitely can see why people love Thunder 04, elite tier. Next up, we have the first game that EA released while they had the exclusive NASCAR license. It is NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. This game released on August 31st, 2004. It introduced lower series to the EA games, also with the chase. Career mode was not as in-depth as 04, as all you really do is climb your way from the modifieds to the Cup series. But it's still a really good NASCAR game and definitely worth the playtime. Good tier. Next up, this is NASCAR 06 Total Team Control, and this was the true downturn for the EA series. This game released on August 30th, 2005. And this game had a new engine, which made the physics really, really weird. Like, sometimes they were very unpredictable. Like, you go into one turn, have all the grip in the world, but you go into the next one and you feel like you're losing the car. This introduced in-race commands, which is a really cool feature. You could switch cars with teammates in the middle of a race, which I thought was so cool at the time. Game was weird, and career mode was definitely a copy and paste, but still a solid game. Solid tier. Next up, NASCAR 07. This game released on September 6, 2006. It was an interesting cover choice, having Elliott Sadler in his old Robert Yates fire suit, even though at the end of the year he was with Evernham Motorsports, but we won't talk about that. The physics were definitely better than 06, but the career mode was still the same, and AI definitely seemed like they were really improved. But for this game, good tier. Now we come to NASCAR 08, and you might be asking why I have two separate ones. As you can see, I have the game console that it's played on every single game cover on the slide. So for this one, I have the PS2 version and the Xbox 360 version. And let me tell you, across the platforms, these are two completely different games. We'll talk about the PS2 version first. This game released July 23rd, 2007, along with a 360 version. This game introduced Rewind, which is a really cool feature. The physics were good, unlike the 360 version. Career mode was slightly improved, so for that, solid tier. Now we have to talk about the Xbox 360 version, because my gosh, this is awful. It's the exact same as the PS2 version. Both games also have no manufacturer resemblance, but the 360 version the physics were just simply awful. It was undrivable without assist. So for that, trash tier for the 360. Now we'll go to NASCAR 09. Talk about the PS2 version first. This game was released June 10th, 2008, and it was basically a copy and paste from the 08 game. I mean, it is exactly the same. So, solid tier again for NASCAR 09. Now, the 360 version. The only upside to this game is that it had an in-depth paint booth, and that was about it. Physics were still awful, and it was undrivable. Once again, trash tier. Now that brings us to the second arcade game, NASCAR Kart Racing. This game released on February 10th, 2009. And I mean, it's fine as a kart racer, but the thing is like, nobody asked for it. There were only 12 drivers, and this was actually EA's last game, which makes this really depressing. So, meh tier. Now that brings us to the start of the Eutechnic series with NASCAR The Game 2011, and we'll be talking about the Xbox 360 version first. This game released March 29th, 2011. It had 2010 drivers at launch despite being published in 2011, which is just kind of weird, but the upside of this game is that the physics were solid, which is something consistent throughout the Eutechnic series. The AI were a little off and a little too easy, and the career mode was basically non-existent, so for that, meh tier. Now we have to talk about the Wii version. The AI are even worse on the Wii. The physics are stiff as hell, and it just does not drive the same. So for that, the Wii version, trash tier. And that brings us to our third arcade game, NASCAR Unleashed. This game released on November 1st, 2011. This game is an awesome arcade game, and it is a million times better than Kart Racer. It's really, really fun and and you can definitely have a good time playing it. So for that, good tier. Now that brings us to NASCAR the Game Inside Line for the Xbox 360. This game released November 6, 2012. The AI were massively improved from 2011. The career mode was better, not as good as some other games, but it was better. The physics were great, and the challenge mode in this game was best in any NASCAR game. Good tier. Now we have to talk about the Wii version. The physics were really stiff, and the AI didn't move and are a lot like the NASCAR 21 AI, and they are terrible. The game was really weird, but still semi-enjoyable at times, so for that, meh tier. Next up, we have NASCAR 14. This game released February 18th, 2014. The game is largely the same as Inside Line. The AI were improved, the UI was definitely a little bit better, career mode was a little better. So for that, good tier. Next, we have NASCAR 15, which released May 22nd, 2015. That's the base edition. And this game is exactly the same as NASCAR 14, so I guess we'll have to put it up there with 14. And next up, we have the start of the modern NASCAR Heat series with NASCAR Heat Evolution. This game released September 16th, 2016. And this game was definitely rushed, and you could tell it was. The physics were twitchy. This game had the worst graphics out of any NASCAR game I've ever seen. Career mode was okay and it was fine, but the game just felt empty. And the AI were about the only good thing about this game. And so for that, trash tier. Next up, the second installment in the Heat series with NASCAR Heat 2. This game released September 12, 2017. Damn, I can't say anything today. This game had improved physics and improved the graphics a little bit, and it also brought in Xfinity and trucks for the first time since NASCAR 09. But the problem with this game is that it still feels empty, so for that, meh tier. Next up is NASCAR Heat 3, which released September 7th, 2018. This game had improved graphics, the career mode was improved massively, and which brought in a fantasy dirt series for you to work your way to the top, and you can now own your own team. So for that, this game goes in the solid tier. Next up, we have NASCAR Heat 4, which released September 13th, 2019. And let me just say, this was probably the biggest leap that the Heat series ever made in terms of just overall improvement. The gameplay was massively improved. This game had so many user options that you could just forge the AI to do whatever you wanted it to. The physics were improved. The ping pong effect that was in every Heat game was basically gone. The audio was way better. The physics were way better. The graphics looked good for the first time. Didn't look like something from a PS2. It actually looked like something kind of from a late Xbox 360 game. And the career mode had some minor tweaks. The physics were still lacking. It still felt like an arcade game, but this was finally the first good Heat game. Good tier for this one. Next up, we have NASCAR Heat 5. This game released earlier in the year than usual on July 10th, 2020. This game, it was buggy at launch, and it was basically a copy and paste from NASCAR Heat 4, which I don't know how they messed that up. But it did add some minor new features, like it did add a custom schedule and some more things to the, I guess you can call it a paint booth, not really, more like a custom car, but whatever. But overall, this game was underwhelming, and really, this game still crashes on me every once in a while when I go back to play it. But it's still a decent game, so for that, solid tier. Next up, we have NASCAR 21 Ignition, which released October 28th, 2021. What can I really say about this game that hasn't been said? It is simply awful. The game was terrible at launch, a buggy mess that they still haven't fixed half of the bugs that were in the game. The AI are atrocious. It still has so many bugs, And I think the real problem with this game started with the amount of hype it got at launch. YouTubers like Real Radman were just hyping this game up, saying that it was in good hands, but deep down, everyone probably knew that this game was going to be messed up. The physics that everybody said were good were really 50-50. They are twitchy sometimes, but sometimes they're stiff. The game is just terrible and is probably the worst NASCAR game ever. Straight up trash tier. And that brings us to the most recent NASCAR console game, which is NASCAR Arcade Rush. This game came out on September 15th, 2023. This problem I have with this game is that it's super expensive at $50, and it is still $50 on the Xbox store. And this game at launch was really buggy, and it's kind of expensive, like I've already said. It's very underwhelming. The game is short, kind of boring, but it's better than Kart Racer. Like, it just feels kind of empty, but I'm not going to put it in trash tier, so meh tier. Now, I'm going to go through every series and just kind of tell you what I thought about them as a whole. Now, we can split the EA Sports one into two sections. We're going to start off with the first part of it, which went from NASCAR 98 to NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. And I call this the improvement series of EA. The strong point of the early EA games every year is that there was some sort of improvement every game, besides 2001. Career mode was usually improving, the physics were always solid, the AI were decent, and the games always had a lot of external content like legend drivers, more alternate paint schemes, the iconic Thunder challenges, and not to mention just the overall presentation of the game. The pre-race intros were always really cool, and everybody just loves these early EA games, myself included. Now, we're going to talk about the original Heat series. The original Heat series was very innovative and made what is, in my opinion, the best NASCAR game of all time with Dirt to Daytona. The things that they did very well were the AI, and the physics were decent, not better than EA, but still, these games hold up pretty well. And this series is what you have to thank for EA making some banger NASCAR games. Just think about it. Without the competition that EA had, they probably wouldn't have made Thunder 04 or Thunder 03 or 05, really. So you can thank the Heat series for those bangers games. Now, we have to talk about the EA Sports part of the declining NASCAR games. This is where NASCAR gaming saw its downfall. EA switched to a new engine for NASCAR 06 and it just made the games feel weird. And another thing is that after Thunder 04, EA managed to secure the exclusive NASCAR license, and with no competition, they just decided to not put any effort into the rest of the games, and it really showed. The series went out on a whimper with a 360 and PS3 versions of 08 and 09. Not to mention that mid-tier, kart racer game. Next, the Eutechnyx series. To start the series, Eutechnyx made everyone mad with the first game with basically no career mode and the odd AI, and because of this, no one wanted to buy the next game Inside Line, which that game was really, really good. And then this just led to NASCAR 14 and 15 being made with little to no effort and almost being copy and paste of Inside Line. The strong point of this series was the attention to detail and the physics, not to mention that the presentation was actually pretty solid. These three things made these games so much fun, but the weak point of this series was always the AI. While they did improve on it, the AI just never really felt right, and I feel like that was the Achilles heel of this series. The second coming of the Heat series. Now, the second Heat series had mixed reviews, but I will give the developers credit. They improved on every game, and after a disastrous start, they managed to make a couple of really solid games. The strong point of the Heat series was obviously the AI. They would move lanes, move around the track, and 704 really programmed them very well. But the weak point was obviously the physics and the graphics. The graphics started off looking like a PS2 game and they eventually upgraded, but it still didn't look like a current gen game, and it just looked like a 360 game. The physics always felt way too arcadey and twitchy, and that's really why no one thought of these as great games. Now that brings us to NASCAR 21 Ignition. I'm not even going to discuss it. Everybody knows it's terrible, so no point in really talking about it. Now we're going to talk about the 4 one-off arcade games. Now the NASCAR arcade games are very hit or miss. NASCAR Rumble from the year 2000 was a very solid arcade game made by EA and is actually a lot of fun and has a good amount of drivers in it. NASCAR Kart Racing, released in 2009, and it was okay. This was made by the Freestyle Studio, which is owned by EA, which makes this the last NASCAR game that EA made, and honestly, it just feels lazy. The gameplay is fine, but it just has no attraction factor to it. NASCAR Unleashed was the next one, which released in 2011, and was made by Activision, which was a partner of Technics. This game is probably the best arcade-style game of the 4. The gameplay is awesome, and I feel like they got the perfect real-life drivers in the game. It didn't feel like any slouches. The final game, and the most recent NASCAR console game as a whole, is NASCAR Arcade Rush, which was released last September. This game is fine, and as an arcade game, but there's just a severe lack of content, and at launch, this game was buggy. But the thing that is probably the worst about this game is the fact that it is $50, and it's still that price on Steam and the Microsoft Store. The gameplay is fine, but that's all I really have to say about it. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree. Also, the link for this tier list is in the description if you want to check it out and make your own. Feel free to screenshot them and send them to me on Instagram. Also, like and subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I hope you enjoyed this different kind of video today. Y'all have a good one.